about being a member of the Information Society? That's a difficult question because I didn't know we were in the Information Society.
Alright, y'all. Welcome back to my channel here and Simply Reefing. I'm going to go ahead and go over the Aquamax T1 calcium reactor and what came in the box and how to set it up, or at least get all the tubing piped here, and what you'll really need to get for a calcium reactor, and how to kind of get that up and running here. So this is going to be probably a multi-part little mini series here on calcium reactors. So first thing I want to go over here really is the calcium reactor itself. It is the Aquamax T1 calcium reactor. They have a couple of different versions of this. They have a nano hang on the back, the T1, and I believe also the T2 calcium reactor. This particular one here will handle up to 300 gallons, so that should future-proof me here whenever I do decide on upgrading to the tank at a later date. But what you guys get in the box is going to be your reactor and at least one line for the CO2 to come in. This white line here, and you get an attachment for your tank for the effluent coming out to drip into wherever you would like for it to go. So you guys are probably wondering, what am I doing? Taking off the plumbing parts here. Sorry guys. So I can go and show you guys what we have going on. So pop the top off. And as far as the setup on this, it was fairly straightforward. It does have a very nice CJ 0.5 recirculation pump that does get attached with some fittings here. So you get your pump. There is a white casing that goes around this. I'm assuming it is to reduce the noise. But I've had a few CJ pumps myself. They're fairly quiet right out the box. So we'll see how that goes with this one here and take it from there. So on your top plate here, you have your inlets for all of your CO2, your water inlet and outlet, the recirculation line, and also the pH probe holder here. Other than that, top plate goes on fairly well. Probably gonna end up putting this on backwards here, but I'll fix that. So that way their logo ends up showing nice here. Again, the top plate has all the thumb screws on it, so you can go ahead and tighten these down, get those locked into place. With the calcium reactor, I'm hoping to be able to get everything in the tank as far as just the calcium alkalinity much stable, and go from there. So as you can see, the top plate went on pretty well. The CJ pump just locks into place with the two locking screws here, and that's pretty much it. Now, just a good rule of thumb, they do have these little blue tabs, which are the security locks for your push connects. So you want to make sure whenever you're setting this up, you go ahead and remove those whenever you're dealing with the, let me get this unscrewed here. Whenever you're dealing with any of your RO tubes or your CO2 lines and things like that. Here we have the bubble counter. So this will actually get filled with RO water a little bit up. I believe I'll grab the instructions probably halfway or 3/4 away from the top. Your inline for your CO2 is going to come in here. your tank water or your plumbing is going to come through here. What I do like on this that they did add on, and it might or might not be a problem, I'll cross that bridge when I get there, is this particular pre-filter for your inlet for the water coming in. Now it does unscrew, and you got a nice little filter pad that's in there. Nice touch with it, since it depends on how you're going to get water in there. You're either going to use one of the Tom's Aqua Lifter or some type of feed pump. Something's going to either pull, push, or deliver water into the calcium reactor. And you don't want to put any additional crud in there, so that pre-filter is nice. Now if I find that it's getting clogged up, then I'll definitely go in and take that off of there. But the pre-filter sits up in this little holder. It is easily accessible. Again, all of this can swivel around. I can turn this wherever your inlet line for the water coming in is going to go. Here's your adjustment knob for the effluent coming in, which also adjusts the effluent line or your water coming out of the reactor. So on the top, this connects here. We got this connection to the top here, and make sure you guys hold on to these little blue tabs. Lift up on the connector just a bit, the push fitting, and pop that guy back on there. The bubble count, here's your adjustment knob for the effluent coming in, which also adjusts the effluent line or your water coming out of the reactor. So on the top, this connects here. We got this connection to the top here, and make sure you guys hold on to these little blue tabs. Lift up on the connector just a bit, the push fitting, and pop that guy back on there. The bubble count, it actually is going to feed in through the top plate. Again, like I said, quick and easy with the push connect. Make sure you push it down, it's nice and snug. Depending on where you guys have this installed, whether it's in the tank or out the tank, you really just don't want it to leak anyways. So whether I'm going to probably have it outside of the tank, I don't think I'm going to put this inside of the tank, but yeah, I would rather it not leak. So that is the initial setup on the Aquamax as far as just getting all those plumbing pieces in there. The last part that they do give you here is going to be this little connection piece that's going to sit right on the tank. It has a thumb screw on the bottom or top, however you mount it, and then the effluent line coming out of the reactor with the RO tube is going to just slide right in here, and then you mount it to wherever you're going to put it, inside the tank, outside the tank, definitely inside of the tank, but either on the lip or on the rim of the tank there. I'm going to find somewhere where I can mount this. I do have a little bit of a lip inside of the tank where I can mount this, which is going to be by the Chato to drip the effluent in closer to the Chato and get that taken care of. So this probably won't be the line I'm going to use for that, but I just want to show you guys that's also what comes in this kit. So really you have your plumbing. As far as plumbing, you have the RO tubing, this connector, and the reactor itself. Additional stuff that you guys will need to get when you're dealing with a calcium reactor. As you guys can see, I have the media over here, but dealing with the reactor and then going back, and then I'll talk about the media that I'm using, is going to be a CO2 check valve. Why I say CO2 check valve, there are a lot of check valves out there. It is something that you're going to want to pick up, whether it be for the Planet Aquarium stuff or any of your food grade items. There is different check valves out there. I would say probably this one that I got from off of Marine Depot. It is CO2 approved. So that's going to be a big plus there. There's another one that was made out of brass. I'm not too sold on having brass there near a saltwater aquarium. And this seems to be a pretty good German company that a lot of the Planet guys have gone with. But there are different ones out there. Just make sure that your check valve for the CO2 is CO2 compliant. And what that's going to do is it's going to stop the water from siphoning out of the bubble count back into the CO2 reactor once you got it hooked up. So you want to get a pretty good one here, or you're just going to, if power goes out or whatever the case may be, water doesn't get sucked up back inside of the tank and cause you some serious problems there. Next up is going to be the pH probe that's going to go inside of the reactor itself. So as far as the pH probe goes, I would definitely suggest on not skimping on this, getting a pretty good quality, I'm going to say double junction pH probe, mainly because one, you don't want to have to deal with recalibrating this thing as often or dealing with any issues with it. So again, all of this stuff picked up during Black Friday, so I got a pretty good deal on everything. I did get the bulk resupplies double junction. Unfortunately, I missed out on a few of them that were out and available. I think Marine Depot had a pretty good one for the double junction. So do get your pH probe, which again is going to go inside of the probe holder. What at the top here, once you take this plug off, what that's going to do is it's going to go ahead and measure the pH inside of the reactor and help with getting everything set up and keeping the pH in check inside of the reactor here. I've seen some people use it and some people don't, but I'm going to go ahead and use it. I have a Apex with an available slot on it for that probe, and it will be used for how I'm going to have this all set up. Again, double junction pH probe, another thing that you guys are going to have to get there. You can get a single, you can get one of the single junction, or there's a standard pH probe. Just keep in mind when you're doing the calibration on it, it may need to be calibrated more. So that is a good reason to buy a better quality on it. On top, again, the junction, you're going to want to pick up a few the calibration solutions here so that we can get it calibrated. The 4 and 7 is going to be what you're going to want to pick up, mainly because your pH inside of the reactor is going to be anywhere between, I believe, 6.8 or 6.5. That's going to be really dependent on the media, and also as you're testing. When I say testing, as far as testing what your alkalinity is at. So there's going to be a couple things there, but I would say as far as your buffer, a 4 and a 7. I did pick up the Milwaukee ones here. It does have some different readings on it. A pretty good one here that I do like, mainly because I get readings for different temperatures. So based on what the tank temperature is, I can go ahead and check to see where I'm at with that. Let's put this over here. So now that's for the reactor, getting that set up and getting pH plugged into it. I really don't want to drop that, so I'm going to move that here. Now, as far as your CO2, which is going to be the main thing that's going to melt the media, this is going to be a little 5-pound tank. They have them all the way up to, they have 10, 20, 30-pound tanks. Usage is going to vary depending on, how much you're dosing in there and things like that. So a couple things with the CO2 tank. I've seen a few of them before, but as far as, you know, what I'm going to need for this setup, you have your tank, standard CO2 tank. They ship empty, so you are going to have to find somewhere to fill it. I would suggest checking around first before grabbing a CO2 tank. I have a few breweries in the area that I was able to contact, and they were able to go ahead and fill this up for me here. There may not be such places in your area, so I would take a look to see for food or medical grade CO2. Air Gas, which is a company out there, they do or have exchange programs where you can go in, pick up a CO2 just like you would with a propane tank, purchase one, and then do an exchange program with them. So again, definitely check around first before you go and purchase a CO2 tank, that you'll be able to either get it filled or you may have to actually do some type of exchange program with them. Also, I would note, once you're comfortable with with doing a calcium reactor, probably look into getting a spare or backup tank just in case you do run out of CO2 and it's after hours, or you're just feeling lazy. Who knows? That happens. So if it does and you have a spare tank, that's going to be better than running out of CO2 and having to go and start your whole process over again to get everything back on track. Again, we're really doing this all just to have stability, and we don't want to keep causing instability in the tank by not being prepared. So I may end up getting another tank. Depends on, again, how long does the CO2 last in this tank for my system and my reef tank. But we'll see what happens there. Like I said, this is a whole new venture for me here with the calcium reactor. We'll take a look at it. The gauge, the CO2 gauge here, one thing that I have not seen too many videos on, and again, I haven't checked on the planet side, planet aquarium side of stuff, but a lot of people, when they talk about the calcium reactor, I barely see anybody go over the gauges here and what you'll need. So first thing, it came with 2 washers on the gauge here. I'm definitely going to hold on to these because those are the washers that connect the CO2 to the gauge. I don't need it leaking, so I'm definitely going to hold on to those like my life depended on it, because it does, because CO2 is poisonous and odorless. The gauges on here, you have one gauge on the top, or actually top, left, right, however you want to look at it. This gauge is going to be for the tank pressure, and this gauge is going to be for the line pressure. That's something I don't see too many people talk about here, and it's a good thing. I'm going to have to do a little bit of research on the line pressure. I've seen anywhere from 3 to 8 psi, and how you're going to adjust the psi once you get this hooked up to the tank is, let me plug this in here for a second, that way I have my hands free. It's actually going to be this little black knob on the front, that knob. And just make sure, once you guys get this all set up, just tighten these down, get a wrench, tighten them down, make sure they're nice and snug on there. So this little knob here is going to adjust the PSI of the line, of the CO2 coming out of the line. So that's going to be really important to get in and adjusted there. So like I said, I've seen anywhere between 3 and 8 psi. Probably going to do a little bit more checking on that just to validate it. But here is your needle valve on this particular one. This will adjust again how much CO2 is coming out. So when I say that, you have your tank pressure and your line pressure, and then this needle valve is going to adjust how much CO2 is coming out of the line, going into the, spin this around here, into your bubble counter. So what's going to happen is this line will be hooked up to this bubble counter. Now how much pressure is on that line is going to be told here. So that's why I'm saying I'm going to go and take a little bit further look into that to try to get some more information. Unless you guys know right off the top of your head, maybe you can let me know, because I'm probably going to have this hooked up by the time I get this all squared away. So yes, 3 to 5 psi, your needle valve adjusted. There are different gauges that are out there. There's the carbon dose gauge, but starting out with the reactor myself, I just went ahead and got one that I can actually control with the apex. Sorry, let me bring this around again. So what I mean by control with the apex, this is an electronic solenoid. It has an on and off. And that on and off, I'm going to use the apex to control that. So as you can see, plug it in. See, the little light that came on, it's on, off. What that does is it opens the valve, lets the CO2 flow. That's why with the pressure coming out of here, when it's open and it is pushing CO2 through the line, you don't want to have too much pressure and blow a line or blow the seals on the reactor. That wouldn't be good at all. So there are, like I said, different gauges that will electronically control everything. I opted to go for this one because I'm going to have it run to the apex and control from there. So with that being said, the pH probe is going to say when your pH is 6.8, turn the reactor on. That's going to turn the reactor on or turn on the CO2 feed CO2 into the calcium reactor and lower the pH in the reactor down to a set point. That may be 6.5. Again, I'm going to go through and see what's going to be best for my tank and adjust it as such. So once the pH gets down to that level, it'll turn off the solenoid, CO2 stops flowing, pH comes back up. Now, you always want to make sure with the needle valve, you adjust it to where you don't have a constant off and on cycle. And that's just going to come with time. You may be able to get this flow coming out of here into here perfectly set, no problems at all. And this solenoid never has to turn off and on, but your apex will be there, or whatever you use to control the CO2 leaving here, going into here. Whatever you use for that, there are pH controllers that are out there that are completely separate from an apex that will tell you what the pH is of the system, and then you can fine tune it with the needle valve and or the flow rate of what's coming in and adjust it as such. So however you guys decide on going forward, I'm going to go in and use the apex for mine. That way I make my life a little bit easier, and it does give a bit of a safety buffer just in case. So if I do get it dialed in perfectly fine and I don't need to have the apex kicking in as much, then that's perfect. It'll be there as a backup. As far as the media goes, I'm going to be using the Two Little Fishies Reborn along with the Remag. There are different medias that are out there as far as aragonite and or different not supplements, but a different media that goes into the reactor itself. So from my understanding, this does pretty well. Again, all brand new, so we'll see how well it does. I've seen folks use the, I think it's the Carib C, their aragonite or such like that in their reactors. I've seen folks go with a reactor with no magnesium. I've seen folks use magnesium in there. I would suggest testing. You are going to have to run tests weekly or daily just to make sure that your alkalinity is fine and you're not pushing out too much alkalinity or too little alkalinity into your tank. So at the end of the day, you are going to have to test, invest in a good test equipment. I currently use, move this here. I currently use a HANA checker for my test. So I'm going to go ahead and once I get this all started, I'll be testing that daily here and just seeing where everything's at. And then once I get it dialed in, I'm going to move to like a weekly test. But for right now, just wanted to go ahead and bring you guys this video here on the setup, or at least, you know, and not really an unboxing, but just the setup of the T1 calcium reactor here by Aquamax. Hopefully everything works out fine. And from my understanding, calcium reactors are the best thing out there. I do 2-part dosing right now, so we'll see. But until then, that being said, you guys have a great day. I'm out.